Hello everyone, my name is Christian Andre, and I want to welcome you to the New Age Show. This is part two of a show that I started last week with Ed McCabe. And hello Ed, how are you doing today?
Hello Christian, doing fine.
Great. And so Ed McCabe is an investigative journalist and an author, and he has a book which I'd like to show you right now so that you have an idea of what we'll be talking about this week, if you're not back from last week. Okay.
That book, by the way, has sold 70,000 copies already by word of mouth. There is no major publisher.
Yeah, because you published it yourself, right? Yes. So this man really went on a mission and has done some great work up until now. And we have somebody to prove it here with us, and his name is Brad Anderson.
Hello.
Hello, Brad. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks.
All right. Now, you're doing great, and you shouldn't be doing great today according to the medical world, right?
No, I should be not here today according to the medical community. I was on a test, I was put on a test 6 years ago, and I'm the sole survivor of that. It was an accumulation of people and being able to get drugs and in San Bernardino County, and I'm the sole survivor of the 100.
Mm-hmm.
So here I sit.
So all these people in the group
have now passed.
Okay, and they were all with AIDS developed, or?
It was basically a study that the government was doing, and they were taking all of the drugs, and which I have taken the drugs. I took drugs, the AZT, for 2.5 years, breathed pentamidine, the Zovirax, the Bactrim, the barrage of toxic medications.
Wow. How did you do on those?
Well, it sterilized my bone marrow and made me severely anemic. And 3 years ago, I got the pneumonia and was basically, they diagnosed me as terminal. The bone marrow was completely which at that time they thought was depleted completely. So
wow. Yeah, all that side effects from the drugs.
From the drugs, right? Yes.
Yeah. So Ed, basically, I mean, did you hear from ozone, about ozone therapy through Ed, or how did?
Well, after I'd recovered from my last illness, because I was breathing the pentamidine to protect me from the pneumonia, and I still got the pneumonia, and I figured, at that point I needed to seek my own answers and stop asking so many and take my life into my own hands. And I have done a program on CBS with Dan Rather on alternative therapies, long-term survivors, and I've done talk shows, and it seems to be evolving.
Great.
Yes.
Okay. So Ed, basically here we brought one of those machines today, and would you like to preface a little bit about it?
What we're going to do is we're going to look at, and Brad is going to mock up the treatment that we've been talking about here, how he is self-administering this treatment to himself within the, what we call the ozone underground.
Okay, so let's name this treatment again for people who were not with us during the first show.
Okay, what we're talking about here is medical ozone therapy. Now, ozone is not smog. We're speaking about the pure forms of oxygen energized, turned into O3 instead of O2. This pure form of energetic oxygen gas is then introduced into the patient's body. When it enters the patient's body, it does two things. It starts oxidizing anything that doesn't belong in the body, like toxicity, pollution, chemicals, this AZT. If someone's taken AZT, the residue of that is still in the body. It starts burning that up and removing that from the body. But the major thing it does is it starts to attack all the bacteria, all the viruses, all the funguses that cause all the diseases like pneumonia, Kaposi sarcoma, night sweats fever, Coxsackie virus. All this stuff is caused from pollution, toxicity, and microbes living in the body fluid, which is, we of course are 66% water, 2/3 of us is water.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole point is you need to purify that body water. All the body fluids need to be purified by putting ozone into the body in a regular course, day after day after day for a while. Then you can, people skip a while, then they go back, and then maybe 3 times a week, which is what Brad is doing now. What they're doing is they're coming after purifying this water continually until it becomes clean. But that's hard to do in our society because we're constantly intaking pollution, we're breathing the Los Angeles air, we're eating contaminated food, the water's not quite right, who knows what was in the glass before you drank out of it at the restaurant, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a continual process, this cleansing process. But to arrest the disease and try to turn it around, a very heavy-duty form of that is applied to the patient's body. So what we've got here is we've got a tank of pure medical-grade oxygen. That's called USP oxygen, green bottle oxygen, whatever you want to call it. It's pure medical grade, suitable for use in medicine. That black hose on the top runs down into the silver box, so the oxygen goes into the box. That box is an ozone generator. That takes the oxygen, turns it from O2, splits it apart into a lot of O1s. They could quickly reassemble into O3, O4, etc., ozone forms. And then out the other side of the box comes ozone. Want to pick up the syringe there, Brad?
Sure.
So what happens is the AIDS patient will take the syringe, fill it up from
the pressure. There's a tube that comes out of here, and it fills this full of whatever you're going to infuse, whether it's just O2 or ozone.
So
I
just
rotate.
O2 would be just as a switch that you would
Yes,
turn on?
and you would turn this on for the activated ozone, if you will.
Okay.
This syringe is filled, and I then take this butterfly, and this is an interlock syringe.
What does that mean?
Meaning that it just interlocks here. You know, it's an airtight. When you're
Okay.
doing infusions, you have to be careful. You have to be certain that you're airtight, you know, because of the nitrogen.
Nothing else could get in there?
Yes. And then
Okay.
basically what I do is I clear the line and I infuse.
In other words, he purges out any air in there so it
Yes,
doesn't get air into his
clear
body.
the line, purge the ambient air, and
I mean, how do you see? Because it's only gas coming out, so how do you know you've
You smell
pushed
the
out?
end of the needle.
Oh,
And if
and-
you smell the ozone, you know the air's gone.
Yeah, that ozone smell, which is very characteristic. Yeah.
And then basically what I do is I infuse, and the blood, when you hit the vein, will be, before my therapies, in the beginning of my therapies, this needle constantly clogged because I was so dirty.
Yeah, we talked about this on the last show. Remember
Yeah.
the dirty blood?
It was almost black.
Almost
and
black, brown, dark purple.
I would have to start over because the needle would clog. I'd have to start another injection. But now my blood, well, basically, my blood is more of a cherry color. It hasn't been as black or as dark
Right.
as in the beginning of the therapy. So
So you can see he's approaching the purification of all the body water.
Yeah.
yes, and there has I believe that cherry color blood is has purified my blood.
Definitely.
I really believe that. So I do 2 of these in each therapy.
So you have a needle that I mean, right now I see just let's show it so that people
That's
can
called
see.
a
Oh,
butterfly needle or a winged infusion set because it looks like it has little wings on it.
Yeah.
And those wings press against the arm, holding it down, so then that the needle stays in place and you tape it down.
Oh, okay.
And then he will take the syringe in the other hand and very, very slowly, very, very slowly, if you do it fast, you'll what they call sclerose the vein or burn the vein. So that's never done fast. Done extremely slowly. How long does it take you to do a syringe?
It takes me 20 minutes for a syringe. When I do 2 to 3, it takes about an hour.
Yeah. Very,
And how do you see that the syringe is full? I mean, because it's a gas in there, right? So how do you
Yes.
see?
well, you have an airtight seal between
Yes,
the syringe
it's airtight.
and the generator itself. So the generator, simply the pressure coming out of the bottle will force the plunger back. You don't pull the plunger back. It's forced back by the pressure of the oxygen. So
There
you
you go.
know if it's airtight, the only thing in that syringe is oxygen,
Yeah.
ozone.
Yeah.
There you go.
So then he will do 2, these are 60 cc syringes, and he's worked his way up to where his body
Yes.
will very gently take 120 cc's per day, and he does this now 3 times a week. But he had to
Yes.
work up to that.
Yes, I've been doing ozone and oxygen colonics in the hyper bag. It's just been in the last 6 months that I've been able to do the infusions.
Because before it was just too strong. You were getting to. I mean, you would have gotten.
Well, it
too
was
strong of a-
basically access to, because to
Oh,
get
okay.
these tools to apply the therapy is, you know, you have to pretty much go underground.
But in the first infusion, what generally happens is because the person's body is so toxic, he can only take a little bit of oxygen-ozone mixture. The first infusion I gave to myself, I could only take 27 cc's, and then I started to cough.
Is that what happens? Okay.
Yeah.
So you start just getting cleansing reactions,
Yes.
right?
What happens is the blood has to be a certain level of purity to even take the oxygen. So if you're toxic, you can only get a little ozone oxygen in there, and then it starts to outgas in the lungs. The analogy I always draw is that if you go to a service station and you fill up your gasoline tank, when it's full, it runs down the side of the car. Well, when your blood system takes as much as it can take that day, you will start getting a tickle or a cough in the throat, and at that point, the needle's pulled out and people stop right
That's
then.
when you know to pull it out.
You're full. For that day, you're full. But as you attack it, you keep purifying more and more and more. The blood can take more and more, so the number goes up. The amount you put in goes up accordingly, and he's now up to 120 cc's.
Yeah.
Wow.
I've seen very, very healthy people go up to as much as like 8 syringefuls of 60 cc ozone. Now, it's funny, it's like a bell curve. People that are terribly sick, I've seen them take up to 8 syringefuls too, because their blood is, it's so filthy and so polluted, it just sucks it up like a sponge, and nothing happens.
Yeah.
So they get up to about 8 syringefuls, but then they approach the bell curve, they come down to around 27, then they start going back the other way as they build up their cleanliness. So at the two ends of the curve, you have really super healthy vegetarians that do colonics and run and exercise and good food and all that stuff. And at the other end, you have very sick people. But most people that first get ozone can only take about 27, 25, 10 cc's is what some doctors will start out with. And I've been all over the world interviewing doctors doing this, and this is common around the world.
Okay.
Yes, and also I'd like to say is, yeah, basically that you can do the ozone or just the oxygen infusions, and that I have not taken any medications for 2.5 years.
Wow.
There's been no need to. I've had no infections, the earaches, the sore throats.
Wow.
So,
let's list the things you used to have.
well, from all the drugs, I had cardiomyopathy, I had or peripheral myopathy, which was numbing of the fingers. I was severely anemic. I had, in '84, when they diagnosed me with AIDS, I had a blood parasite, which I believe this could have taken care of that without all the barrage of toxic drugs. And then the pneumonia, and then just in between those periods, there were just infections, fevers, colds, flus, and there has...
That's the classic progression of the disease.
Exactly, and each little thing I got, they'd give me more drugs, so it was like compounding the problem. And since I've been infusing and doing ozone now for 2 years, there's not been any infection.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
That's amazing. That's really amazing. I mean, I think that, you know, this is going to give a lot of hope to people that have, you know, degenerative problems, because this, and you will confirm it, Ed, is not only good for AIDS, but any type of degenerative disease.
I've talked to hundreds of people that no longer have cancer, just cancer alone. Arthritis seems to go away very rapidly, and many of the people I've interviewed as a journalist.
I believe that it would eradicate really a lot of disease as a preventative. If people got onto the oxygen thing, I don't think there would be as much disease, because with oxygen you're burning up the toxins that are creating the disease. So
now right now,
it will benefit the world, I believe.
So right now, everybody watching the show is going, if this was so good, we'd all be doing it. So let's talk about why we're not doing it.
Yeah, let's do it.
We're not all doing it.
And also that, you know, getting okay from a doctor, or because my doctors, I don't know if they're still laughing, they're wondering what's going on, why I'm hanging on for so long, but there was no approval from no one. It's basically going to a whole life expo and learning, because there's healings taking place. It's just a matter of finding the tools to apply it correctly.
Yeah.
So
you've been hanging. I mean, you're looking
great.
good.
Yeah, I feel
you
good.
gained weight, and you
yeah, I have gained weight, and I'm my appetite, everything, my clarity. I sleep less. I'm not fatigued. I'm not the diarrheas and vomiting, and
that's great.
And everything is pretty much in control.
Well, I think what tells the tale here is, like you said at the top of the show, which is he's 1 out of 100 people.
Yes,
they're all dead.
They're all dead.
And
everyone today too seems to get sicker or die, and Brad seems to be doing fine. And I think I think it's because I've taken my life into my own hands and seeked my answers in the alternative field.
Great.
You know, so.
So Ed,
So
what's going on
Okay,
here? I mean, can
so if this is
somebody
any-
needs this in America? What do they do? What happens?
Well, let's first talk about what we've tried to do.
Okay.
I have done a number of things as the author, as the journalist, as the lecturer, as the supplier of information to our society on this subject. I have written personal letters to all the heads of all the major talk shows and their staffs. I've express mailed things to them, proofs, summaries, et cetera, medical records. I've done the same thing with all the sports athletes in this country. I've done the same thing with all the movie stars in this country. I've done the same thing with all the news bureaus all around the country. Nobody has called back seeking information. They simply do not call back. They do not respond to the phone calls. They don't respond to the written proof you express mail them. So that's a very odd situation. So to try to turn this around, what I did was I took 2 completely healed AIDS patients, same type of thing as we're talking with Brad here, took them to Washington, D.C. to meet with Senator Harkin, Congressman Walsh, and Congressman Joel Heffley from Colorado. Congressman Walsh is my congressman in upstate New York.
Mm-hmm.
Senator Harkin is on the committee for the National Institute of Health funding, so he holds the purse strings. He scheduled a half-hour meeting with us. I brought to Washington, in concert with former Iowa Congressman Berkeley Bedell, 2 completely healed AIDS patients, all their medical records proving they had the disease, proving they were perfectly healthy, PCR negative, no trace of the virus in their
Okay,
body.
so let's just explain very briefly what PCR negative means, because
That
not
tests
everybody
for the
knows.
actual presence of the virus itself. They were also Western blot negative and ELISA negative, which is the antibodies. They didn't have enough antibodies to show there was an active infection going on in their body.
Okay.
So even more important, like I said last week, than that is all their secondary diseases, like Brad had, have all gone
Yes,
away.
they have dissipated.
Mm-hmm.
And that my P24 or PCR is negative right now and tests negative.
Great, and then I think that we said last week that PCR is even
More definitive.
harder to clear than an HIV test.
And
also that you said that AIDS and HIV might not.
Go together.
exactly. I think it's a cofactor. There's several reasons. I don't think it's one specific.
See, all the research that was done proving HIV causes AIDS was all found to be fraudulent.
Mm-hmm.
So that should have blown it right out of the water, but it was said so often, so loudly, that everybody just assumes that's the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
When actually there's no basis for it, and no one has ever proved the connection.
Exactly.
So what
what I-
happened with
what I-
your senators?
Okay, well, what I use AIDS for, I just want to quickly say,
Okay.
what I use HIV tests for is it shows that there's another bacteria living in your body. Well, if you clean yourself out, there won't be any bacteria. So it's
Yeah.
like an indicator, not the causative, but it's an indicator that your blood is filthy.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're testing positive, your blood is filthy. It doesn't mean you're going to get AIDS. So we went to see the senators. I brought the doctors that treated these 2 patients, completely healed AIDS patients, to them, the medical records, a doctor from North Carolina who'd been shut down by the state medical board for using ozone because they'd never heard of it, and one of his patients who was just incensed that he couldn't get this therapy that was working on him anymore. It was outlawed. And we went to meet with Senator Harkin. He scheduled a half an hour for the meeting. It went so well that an hour and a half later, we were still in the office. He's refusing all calls, and he says, I'm going to make the NIH talk to you. So he phoned the NIH and set up a meeting a month later. National Institute of Health. It's the
Okay.
country's health think tank. It's where all your billions of dollars of tax money goes to, okay?
Okay.
So a month later, we came back to Washington, same 2 healed AIDS patients, all their records, their doctors, the same people that had been shut out of the system, and we said, here it all is. Look, what more do you need to know? You're looking for the answer? Well, let's at least look at this. Let's at least try this. Let's discuss it. Let's investigate it. All they said was, well, these people are obviously so healthy that they were never sick, so we see no reason to pursue this.
Wow.
This is their answer. And
Yeah.
we're sitting there with the doctors and the medical records. The problem is, it's not taught in our medical schools. The doctors don't understand this at all. It's used all over the world. 5 million dosages were done in one study in the University of Innsbruck. 5,000 physicians in Europe use this on a daily basis for 10, 20, 30, 40 years on humans, and yet the FDA in this country refuses to allow human testing of this. And here's Brad, here's the proof sitting right next to me, and they're saying we're not even going to allow you to find out if you can human test.
Mm-hmm.
They won't even let the companies do that. So we think that the fix is in. Either that or the ignorance is so strong that it's blocking all reason and just out of the scene completely. We have to understand that the pharmaceutical industry is a $55 billion a year business. It's the most profitable business in America. every senator, every congressman on the national scene, and probably even locally, the top 3 funding, PAC money fundings of all those senators and congressmen is from the pharmaceutical medical complex.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see the regulatory agencies full of politicians who are getting the wheels greased to go in a certain direction, let's say, are saying that this is quackery, this is baloney, this is all phony. We had an FDA representative stand up in front of Congressman Schumer, who was having a subcommittee meeting on health fraud, saying AIDS, deceit, dollars, and despair was the name of the thing. And the FDA agent stood up. Now, mind you, again, there's 5,000 physicians using this on a daily basis around the world, yet the FDA agent stood up, held up one of these machines, and said, this is an ozone machine. There is absolutely no evidence anywhere in the world that ozone has any use in medicine.
Wow.
And he testified before a congressman. Now, it gets even dirtier than that. The day before, I had faxed to all these the congressional investigators and the heads of the committee doing this investigation. I faxed to all of them the Journal of Hematology study showing ozone 97 to 100% effective in eliminating the AIDS virus, the HIV virus, and completely non-toxic to the human cells. I faxed them the report of the Canadian Surgeon General, who has gone to NATO and said we can totally purify all the blood in the world, all the stored blood, by bubbling ozone through it.
Yeah.
That's in the Canadian medical literature. Medizone Corporation study showing that 12 apes given simian immunodeficiency virus, SIV, infected with that, died within 12 to 14 days. 12 more apes were given that and given ozone, and they're all perfectly healthy. So these are live tests on living animals in Canada. It's been used all over the world for 50 years on humans. So they all knew it. All the people on that committee knew that there was medical evidence, bona fide, peer-reviewed literature evidence that this stuff was beneficial, and yet they stood up in front of the American people on CNN and NBC. They aired the show all during the day, that it's fraud, it's quackery, it's deceit, it's despair. And Congressman Schumer called for 25-year fraud felony sentences for anyone that uses or promotes ozone.
Oh my God, the same guy that talked to you at first, or?
No, this is the guy who was heading the committee.
Oh, yeah.
So in other words, he wanted to make what we're doing here today, discussing ozone, punishable by a 25-year fraud felony sentence. And here's the guy perfectly healthy. Here's 2 more people. There's people all over the country I can bring forward anytime anyone needs it. Yeah. It's been used for 50 years on humans, and there's no side effects, appreciable side effects. What it will do is it will really knock the drug profits out because it's got such a wide range of use for such a number of diseases that's the problem.
Yeah.
And the fact that I haven't used any drugs or any antibiotics or any antivirals for 2.5 years, there's reason enough right there.
Yeah, definitely. So, Ed, what can people do? I mean, we need to turn this around. Somehow the FDA needs to be pressured enough, or is it possible? What can we do? Because we need to do something so that this is legal.
The problem we have right now is that any doctor who tries to use it has the FDA have a SWAT team show up at his door with flak vests on and guns drawn. This happened 3 days ago before the show.
Oh my God.
Dr. Boyce in Mississippi, machine gun toting FDA agents raided his clinic, seized the ozone machine, shut him down completely, went to his house, ransacked it. And this has been going on, but it never gets in the papers. And if it does, the paper always calls the doctor some sort of a quack using strange new things that we don't know what they're talking about. The guy's a nut. And everybody goes, he deserved it. What people don't understand is right under their noses, the answer to most of the medical problems in this country, including the skyrocketing cost of health care, the answer to these problems is being taken from them by the very government they're looking to find the solution. So what they got to do is everything they can do. They got to write the FDA. If someone has AIDS, let's say, get a hold of the FDA and say, hey, why can't I have ozone therapy? It's used all over the world. It's 50 years, hundreds of thousands of people. Why won't you allow the doctors to human test? So the very first thing we need to do is make it legal for the doctors to use the therapy in this country and stop arresting the doctors who are using it. The second thing is we have to become active, of course. All these organizations, congressmen, senators, FDA, AIDS activist organizations, all of them have to be worked with. They have to be educated. You've probably tried to contact some of these organizations.
Sure, I've written APLA in certain groups, sent ozone literature, and basically a description of my health, what it was and what it is today, and there was no response.
No response.
There doesn't seem to be any response from anyone.
What we find out is a lot of these organizations get their funding from the pharmaceutical industry.
Burroughs welcome funds like APLA and ACT UP and all of it.
It's a wonder why they don't respond. And yet they hold themselves up as the guardians of the people, the champions of the man on the street. And their funding's coming from the drug companies.
Yeah. So Ed, if you had access to Bill Clinton, what would you tell him?
Well, I could tell him anything. What's he going to do is the point. The point is, what is he going to do? We've got all the... I could take anybody on this planet, sit them down, and if they want to spend 5-6 days, I'll show them all the proof. I'll let them talk to the people on the phone. I'll let them talk to the doctors in jail and out of jail that are using it and not and using it quietly and haven't been caught yet. They can talk to everybody. They can talk to the president, Siegfried Rilling, the president of the International Ozone Medical Association in Europe. And he can tell them there's 5,000 physicians used it for 50 years. I can educate them all they want, but the point is, what are they going to do about it? And who owns them? Who's pulling their strings? What's behind Bill? You know, Bill and Hillary. Who knows? Why don't they respond? Why don't the agencies that they're ultimately responsible for do anything other than stop people from getting well, stop and seizing the machines and just making trouble? And the cost in human suffering, this is the thing that gets me. Okay, I can see business, I can see competition, I can see, well, you want to knock out the competition, you want to protect your bottom line, your profit, you know, return on investment for the show, blah, blah, blah. But with these plagues we have, with the tuberculosis spreading rapidly, with the AIDS spreading, the cancer, these are plagues, and they're murdering our population. And what gets me is people don't do anything about it. It's not business as usual anymore. This is spreading at an exponential rate.
Okay, unfortunately we have to close this, Ed, so thank you, Brad. Thank you, Ed.
Sorry I got ranting in there.
It's okay, no, you did just fine.
Someone needs to.
If we're still on the air, this was the New Age Show with Ed McCabe, who had a lot of things to say, and we're very glad he did, and Brad Anderson. And thank you very much for joining us. That's it.